To kick us off, my name is Jenna, if we haven't met before. I'm the Operations and Programs Manager at the Glass Art Society. And for those, whether you're new to this program live or later on when you watch the recording, GAS is a nonprofit international organization. And we have the mission to encourage excellence, to advance education, to promote the appreciation and development of the glass arts, and to support the worldwide community of artists who work with glass. So this program in particular, we have a couple of quick online just reminders for those using Zoom, including that it's helpful to close other tabs if you have a lot open on your computer. That can kind of help get rid of some of the glitches or any delays in the video quality. And we also ask that for those of you who are not directly asking a question or engaging in a conversation, if you could just remember to mute your microphone, that way we can have the best audio for the speakers and for those wanting to engage in conversation. There is a chat box feature that you can use for either comments or questions if you yourself don't want to come on screen and online. And we also have the raise hand function, but since we have a smaller group of people, we might not need that feature, but it's available to you if you're comfortable with that. And then also as a reminder, new and exciting for this program is that it is being recorded. And so please keep in mind that this will be shared on the GAS Student Center Facebook group, as well as the GAS YouTube channel. So if you are uncomfortable with being filmed, just make sure to keep your camera off and to mute yourselves, and then you can use those other features available as well. So then, without further ado, let's get the September GAS Student Meetup going. This program is held monthly for GLASS students across the world, and we really hope that it provides some connection, shares ideas, and builds community, whether or not you're a member of GAS itself. And every month it is hosted by our GAS student representative, Paige. And with that, I'll pass over the mic to Paige, who will introduce today's topic and our guest panelists.
Thanks, Jenna. So for those who don't know me, I'm Paige. I'm the student representative on the GAS board. And today is actually our 4th student meetup. So this programming is all still fairly new. And we're going to be doing graduate student PechaKuchas. With us today, we have Kimberly Willcox from Alfred University and Cooper O'Brien from Tyler School of Art and Architecture. And then digitally, we'll have Rinoi, Imada, and Ying Lee from RIT. And all they were kind enough to pre-record their PechaKuchas, so I'll screen theirs for everyone. And if you have questions for them, I believe that they have shared their email address at the end of their presentations, and they welcome you to email them any of your questions. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Kimberly, who will start us off.
Okay. Mm-hmm. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. So my name is Kim Wilcox, like Paige said, and I'm currently a 2nd year grad at Alfred University in Alfred, New York. So I started out at Tyler School of Art and Architecture as a painting concentration, and I explored a lot of different things, went through kind of the major programs within many art schools. But so one thing that stuck with me was glass. Here are some of my projects from some of my glass courses while I was at Tyler. All of my electives were filled with glass courses, even though I was not a glass major. And it just like built this community for me to be a part of that I couldn't find in painting, or I did an internship for the Barnes Foundation. It was a wonderful experience, but I really was looking for something more integrated into a community with liveliness and critical dialogue. So this is actually my work from my BFA senior thesis show. As you can see, I kind of expanded away from painting and into the realm of sculpture. And that's when it was suggested to me that I should think about going back to grad school for something more sculptural. Like I said, it was a big, warm community I had at Tyler. And one of the people you see in the picture on the right is actually Reese Peacock. And she helped me kind of put together my graduate portfolio and come here to Alfred. And she's here with me now as an adjunct professor in class. And it's really great to just like have that continuing culture. GAS has been a big part of that community that I talk about, because I got to know a lot of my aspirations in glass by going to the GAS conference in Norfolk, Virginia. And the piece on the left that my friend is standing in front of is actually a piece by Sarah Blood. And now I'm learning from Sarah Blood. And she's one of my advisors. And I just really value the happenstance that happens in this community. It's small, but mighty. Sorry. In the interim between undergrad and graduate school, I made a lot of commission-based work by staying in contact with people at Tyler, and I studio assisted for them in exchange for work time. And that was a really great arrangement because it allowed me to keep in contact with all of my friends and faculty that eventually allowed me to apply to graduate school at Alfred. This actually led me to going to Urban Glass for an Asphalt Families event in like the winter of 2018 or 2017. So that's Jane Julius took me there, and it was just a great experience to kind of see one of the major touch points in the glass world. So this is part of my graduate portfolio and some of the work that I made. I did ended up creating a flame working studio in my home in the interim, and that was a really great just like learning experience. While I was still able to make work at Tyler and use their facilities. So coming to Alfred was also just walking into another big family. At the bottom was the four graduates from my first year here. And that's from going to Bowling Green for glassblowing Olympics that's held amongst the schools in the northeastern part of the United States. And it's just like a place for students to meet up, have fun, and make connections. And top left is, I went to Salem Artworks for an event that involved metalworking. But a lot of people here have access to all of these facilities because Alfred holds their glass department under the Pavilion of Sculpture. So a lot of those students major in a lot of different mediums, which is great for me because I ended up doing a lot more than just working with one medium. A big part of the reason I'm involved in GAS and became a graduate student is because I'm really interested in teaching and pushing students to kind of break outside their comfort zones and push themselves. And so like this is, top left is a class that I assisted Angus Powers with, and the colored light fixture is a class that I assisted Sarah Blood with when she was teaching neon. So as far as my studio practice goes, it's pretty much all over the place. There's a lot of material testing because I find that my materials are driven by my concepts. So whatever I'm working with, I get very specific and investigate the material poetics of any potential material that I'm looking at. My sketchbook is mostly a lot of writing mixed with some, very rudimentary mock-up drawings. But I find that a lot of my practice is more like a three-dimensional sketchbook where I keep everything that I'm working with in my studio and I can see it all next to each other every day. This is a piece from when my first semester here, and it was based on a glassy material, cellophane, and its interaction with static electricity. And as people would walk through the space I had constructed, the cellophane would draw towards your body because you would start to build that static electricity. Getting into working with glass, I've recently been working on panes having to represent bruising or wounding in a way, things that fade or things that are never really seen. And what does it mean to wear those things or claim those things as your own visual imagery? This is a piece where I was inspired specifically by using light as a material. I was inspired by a specific aesthetic of this lamp that had to do with a very specific aesthetic of like a Northeastern American generation from maybe like grandparents or great-grandparents. And I created this installation using found objects from that era and kind of putting dust all over this to the point where you could see it. And it was meant to kind of show a visual stillness and a lack of presence of someone who might have occupied this space. And what have they left behind? This was a video performance of me spackling in some family photos into a wall, and it's projected directly onto the wall when I show this piece. This was really about like history and home and the way that walls can keep energy in a domestic space. And what does that mean for that to build up over time? So when COVID hit, we were all kind of kicked out of our areas and our spaces. So I kind of did my best to experiment with the materials that I had in my home. And I started being interested in different ways of displaying text. And these are just some tests that I did over the summer. This is some of the stuff I'm working on now. Again, dealing with like walls having history on the left and like reflection and the way that light can control mood or space on the right. I'm also working with paper in this way that I'm using paper fortune tellers to kind of tell a story of being denied something, but then creating your own new fortune in place of that thing that you were given. Thank you to Glass Art Society for having me, and thanks to Paige for organizing this. And there's my Instagram handle and my website. Okay. Oh, hold on.
Thanks, Kim. Paige, should I just jump right into this?
Yep, go for it.
Cool. Yeah, desktop. You guys can see that? Okay. 1 second. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Kim. That was really interesting. Thanks, Gas, for hosting this little PechaKucha event. It's interesting trying to think about my work relative to the glass community and sort of how I got here. So I'm going to try and just touch on my work a little bit and also give some context. And I'm trying to keep it succinct. So we're looking at the first thing that I made at grad school. It's not glass, obviously, but it's sort of the first thing that I had to contend with to get this big mold into the kiln. And I was sort of hitting the ground running and trying to play with the idea of what can I do when I'm pushing at the sort of the edges of the studio's capacity. So this is like the biggest kiln we have that can go to a certain temperature. So I was bending things to like see if I can fit inside the footprint. This is the piece that mold was for. It's called Portal, but people sort of have called it, you know, like a Nickelodeon dungeon cell window or something. I like that it's sort of straddling the line between gesture and architecture. This is a detail shot. This is 10 years before that, as an undergrad at RISD. That sort of set the tone for the direction my work was going to go outside of school. I was already kind of fed up with glass blowing after like doing it for a few months. And so I set up the photo series as sort of like making fun of like the machismo of glass blowing. So this is just someone throwing a bucket of water from off camera. And I'm like trying to pretend that it's like some masterpiece on the pipe. But at the same time, it's sort of, is like expressing a genuine interest in like fluid dynamics and flow visualization. So after undergrad, I went to work for Karen Lamont, that's her on the left, being a goofball. In Prague, I was her studio assistant for 3 years and did a lot of waxwork, model making for her Nocturne series, which you see on the right there. That's at the Corning Museum. This is us working at a factory in Denmark on large scale ceramic pieces. That's her husband's finger on the left. They were really generous and they really were very patient and invested a lot of time in me and are still advocates for me now, and I owe them a lot. Considering that I was just like a bonehead out of school when they hired me, I think they really took a chance, and I'm really indebted to them for that. At the time, working for her, I had access to a lot of wax, so I was making these sort of poured wax sculptures, you know, late into the night, these sort of like repetitious pouring action that I would like move this frame around and continually build up surface. At the time, I was trying to find more information on casting, so I took a class with Dean Allison at the Glass Furnace in Turkey, which was really eye-opening. His technical proficiency is pretty amazing, but also contrasting his methodology with like the way I was observing the Czechs and their sort of like traditional way of doing things. I got really interested in the history of the mold making and kiln casting process, but also like how things were being refined with new materials, new techniques. So I went from that apprenticeship with Karen. I was an emerging artist in residence at the Pilchek Glass School in 2015. I brought some of those wax textured objects with me to try and see if I could translate them into glass. And you can see I sort of like resolved that with hot blow molds on the right. Yeah, really great residency. I would recommend it to anybody once PechaKucha is available to do that again. This is some of the work that I produced at the time. I was sort of interested in the visual language of these landscapes, more from a photographic interest, like getting really close to them and taking different angles on them, not so much in like the objects themselves. This is the group at PechaKucha. I just found this on Google while we were waiting. Those are my real ears. So I went from PechaKucha to Wheaton Arts in New Jersey, and made a connection with Hank Adams. We got along really well, and he sort of brought me on as his mold maker. And we started doing a lot of work with his heads that are pretty iconic, I think, in the glass world. And also traveling around and doing these sort of cast floor pieces that are more of a pedagogical tool than anything, but really interesting and engaging like different studio spaces. It's sort of different every time. Yeah, this is us casting. Totally different methodology than Karen Lamont. And I still feel like I'm sort of straddling the line between their approaches to using glass. There's definitely a tension between the two influences that I'm still working out. But yeah, I learned just as much from Hank, and working at a public arts institution as well is really informative on how you view the systems and the facilities and how things work, how things are possible. This is some of the experimental stuff I was doing at the time. If it loads or not is a question that we might not get the answer to. Okay, it's probably just because Zoom. It's just like a breakaway mold for hot blowing. So it's like a thin face coat with the, oh, there we go. Thin face coat with fiberglass mother mold around it, and sort of heat the whole thing up, bring it out, blow into it, and then like rip it off really quickly, and you know, get the impression of the mold, but then keep working it, keep changing the shape. So this is, I think this is a Halloween mask. Yeah, it's a Halloween mask that I just sort of like made a mold of and then peeled it out of the mold quickly. So yeah, unpredictable stuff. This is a self-portrait I did with that technique. That little Teletubby ear was something I put on so that the mold would have something to grab onto when it got pulled off. So it sort of stretched the face. That's my face, self-portrait. I just wanted to like name check other influences. During this time at Wheaton, I was still traveling around and still trying to take classes places and visit other studios. So like one Christmas, I drove out to Iowa to work with Hugh McKay for a week. If you guys are interested in like mold making or advanced technical stuff, he's very interesting and also takes no notes. So you really have to be there to learn it. This is the last thing I made at Wheaton, doing large scale castings, the neodymium glass. And I started this sort of large scale experiment of like trying to pin the core in place instead of the traditional way of like making a collar at the bottom of the mold. If you're familiar with hollow core casting, it's pretty challenging. So I was trying to like just do it differently, see what I could come up with. That interest in hollow core casting is definitely something that is echoing down from my time at RISD. They have a really good casting sort of legacy up there from Dan Clayman, Howard Bentrey. This piece on the left, I helped Dan install it. Grounds for Sculpture in Trenton a couple of years ago. And this weird picture of him on the internet I found. And his like disciple, Adrian Evans Tharp, is the kiln casting teacher at RISD now, who's also extremely technically proficient, and her work is pretty amazing, sedimentary experiment stuff. This is another, like the second thing I made at grad school, sort of a counterpoint to and the like laborious mold making that I was doing, these sort of like gestural, quick in the moment casting objects. I sort of made this like ridiculous hinge piece, and this is my work is now, sort of building off of the copper pipe work that I was using to hold cores in place. I'm sort of expanding that into cast slab objects and sort of like inserting them in the architecture. Yeah, sort of creating these intersecting spaces that I then like sort of intervene in the studio walls with. This is in process. And then COVID, there's the COVID section of the lecture. We sort of had a threat that the furnaces were going to be emptied, and I just couldn't like deal with it, just emptying them onto the floor. So like made this mold, this huge sand mold, like in 2 days, like as fast as I've ever made anything. And it was more an excuse to like get everybody back together before they close the doors and do something crazy. So that's us pouring it. That's the object. Now, just the big thing that I have to deal with. I still am a little scared to cold work it. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. And this is what I'm working on right now, sort of doing some experimental inclusion generating stuff. Sort of seeing what I can do with this idea of copper arrangement inside of castings, but then sort of having some element of tension sort of across these like really rigid elements, and having some more bring that gesture back into it, sort of continually going between rigidity and gesture. Yeah, so that's what I have for you guys. That's my little Instagram, my website. Yeah, thanks again. Appreciate it. Stop sharing. Paige, I think you're muted.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rinoi Imada. I'm from Japan, grew up in around area of Tokyo. I learned it on the United States 5 years ago for undergrad study in Cal State University, San Bernardino, to learn glass art with Catherine Gray. Then now I am here in Rochester Institute of Technology for graduate study. My original artistic ideas came from the connection between human and nature. Especially, I was interested in artificial, human-manipulated nature and animal, since I grew up in a city surrounded by buildings and houses instead of trees and forests. Nature is far and unfamiliar, and the place I feel I am out of. One of the motifs I used in undergrad study was a goldfish. In their history in Japan, they were brought from China for 500 years ago. They kept raised by humans to enjoy people's eyes. Some of them cannot survive in nature no longer. However, their origin was a small carp. They also have possibility to break the circle of life. I was obsessed their beauty of fragility and strength. I made this work very end of my undergraduate study. Try to recreate their life by my hand. Then I graduated Cal State and moved to RIT for pursuing glass art. For first thing I started exploring in here was a connection. Since I use figurative sculptures as the metaphor of myself or human being, I wanted to focus on myself and other human. This is my first attempt to explore human connection with glass. I was interested in visualizing invisible strings between the persons. This was taken in the completely dark room. I asked the participants to not talk, just follow the light of heat, and quietly extend the glass. Then I started to focus on the theme as more individual. I made stringers with our peer and see how they create the cane or stringer with me. I also asked the participants to keep quiet until glass got cold or broke up. Polarized pictures show how much stress was created inside of the stringer. I also focused on the emotion I had while doing this exercise. I made a note the general feelings I felt, but I found mostly my feeling while doing this was apology, because this was so stressful to me. After those explorations of human connections, I was interested in experimenting the glass itself. I was asking to myself why I was captivated to glass, why I use glass for my expression, which quality of the glass emphasizes my idea. I started with alternative blowing process. I used a bicycle pump instead of inhaling air from my mouth. The interesting finding was because of the pumping movement, the glass bubble expands and moves like human organ. The movement was quite organic, however, using a tool. In this work, I simply attempt to project video on glass. I chose the video that is my gesture of the glass, and I blow in glass. It was interesting to see the thing usually not being together in the same place, and especially it is untouchable. After those practices, the pandemic happened and I lost the access to the studio. During the quarantine, I created images which was inspired the quality of the glass, such as clarity, distortion, reflection, and the image through various lenses. These practices are pretty important to me for building up my basic concept of my current art practice. Especially the workshop I held through Zoom after everything moved online. I asked people to bring the things which has the grassy quality. The dance sees through the view and let them wrote a haiku, which is short poem. It was so fun to me to see variety of lenses people wrote and how they think about the world through their own lenses. Of course, and haiku too. Towards my thesis, I am exploring how much I can keep secret and silencing an artwork, such as my starting point was the metaphor. I am interested in not showing myself in the work, however, simultaneously expressing my impression and emotion. I am seeking the space in between. This is my cat, Sumire. I call her Tsu-chan. And if you have any questions and comments, you can reach out to me with the email address or Instagram account. Thank you for listening my talk.
Hi, thank you for joining this artist talk. I apologize for not being able to join this, but I hope you enjoy the video. I'm Ying Lee. You can just call me Ying. I'm currently a second-year grad student in RIT. I come from Taiwan, a really small but beautiful island in Asia. This is my second year living in the state. I graduated from architecture. This is one of my work. I'm always interested in structures, installation, and photography. After I graduated, I worked in a gallery, and I met a glass artist, Tsuji Kazumi from Japan. I asked her if I can work for her. Then she said yes. So I went there with no skill of glass blowing that put me in the position of cold working and packaging. But my boss gave me access to the hot shop. So during that time, I got to practice glass blowing every day, in the morning and the evening. After working for her for 1 year, I went back to Taiwan. I got a job in a glass studio in a department store, teaching a lot of people how to make their own cup. By teaching thousands of the tourists, I get to build up my skills. There's no school in Taiwan teaching glass, so the only way to learn about this is to join the industry. After I feel confident enough, I signed up for the class to PechaKucha. I met a lot of people, a lot of great masters, and also the legend too. That summer, I would say the most fruitful experience is not about just gaining a skill. It's also about knowing a lot of people that share the same passion as me. After I went back, I started to rent studio for myself. I went to PechaKucha again in 2019 because I got a scholarship from PechaKucha. This time the class is called Glassography. It's taught by David Schnagel. This time, no touching glass at all. We just sat in the library, writing and thinking and talking about glass from the morning to the evening. It might sound boring, but it is actually really, really cool. And then we sometimes sit in the forest to talk. I feel like it is kind of like a pre-grad school class. It changed my way of thinking about glass. When I went back to Taiwan, I can't wait to make stuff. I had my first exhibition. Started to think about the materiality of glass much more often. During both time in PechaKucha, I began to ask around schools, like which one did you go? Where did you teach? What kind of program are you focusing on? What's the difference between this school and that school? But this kind of information is something that I cannot get if I'm in Taiwan, so I take my chance when I was in the state. And I found that RIT suited me best and I applied for it. I'm glad I got accepted. One of the best things to get in the grad school after working 3 years in the industry is that I get to make lots of unproductive shit I want. I drew a keyboard on the hot shop floor with 3 different languages. For me, as I have experience working in hot shop in 3 different countries, the hot shop language are quite different in some ways. I won't see them as problematic, I just find it fascinating. And one of the culture shock I got when I get here is people's hair color and skin color are so diverse. So I made a transparent braid to represent the color that has no race, no boundary, free from being labeled. Some of my work talks about sexuality. This is something that I always want to talk about in college, but I'm so afraid of being judged. Now I kind of don't care. This is an installation pen from a ceiling. It works like a pendulum. The sex toy from the top will vibrate, and the glass object in the bottom will move slowly and touching the lubricant oil in the base. Then in the middle of my first year grad school, COVID struck. School shut down, class turned into Zooms. But I started to catch jelly in my kitchen. I found them really like glass, the transparency and the lumicity. This is the second version of the jelly. I had a video of this piece and it's coming soon. And now I'm going to end my thesis here. In the past few weeks, I have been making video works, filming some juicy moment of glass. And for me, glass is the sexiest medium ever, not only for the final product, but also the process of making it. I enjoy expressing the foreplay, the flirtatious act, the ecstasy of erotic through glass. Remember to turn on the sound. If you are interested in following my work, here's my information, my Instagram, email, and website. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes all of our participants. And since we have Kimberly and Cooper here with us today, if any of you have any questions, let's direct our questions towards them. And then if you have questions for Rinoi and Jin, we can either compile them in the chat or you can email them directly.
I have a question for Kimberly. When you were talking about walls and how they sort of hold energy and that spackling piece with your family photos, can you talk a little bit more about how you came to that in your studio practice?
Mhm. So I was thinking about the fact that my family had lived in the same home, like domestic space, for basically my entire life, and so much has happened there. And like thinking about the potential of like selling it at this point, because my mom is officially an empty nester, like, but she's holding on to a lot of value and memory to this place that she raised her children in. But as far as the kids go, like we don't hold a lot of good memories in this home. So I was thinking about like the value of space in terms of like the person activating history as they enter a room. And there was a lot of physical damaging that was done to the walls. And like, so there's actually a lot of physical remnants in my house of like the damage that has been done to like the actual structure of the home. So putting those two things together kind of led me down this road of like destroying the wall and then what are you using to patch it? I could ask you a question.
Sydney.
Like I noticed that a lot of your work is like pushing the boundaries of glass and that it has a pretty witty sense of humor. In what ways does risk play a role in your work?
Risk? I mean, I wouldn't say it's pushing the boundaries of glass. I mean, it's pushing my boundaries. We're trying to. Yeah, I think that I have a certain like desire to inject uncertainty and the like incidental into these like very laborious processes of mold making. Both because like maybe I just don't have the attention span to like really just plod along, but also like I think that the process generates the ideas better than I ever could, and I think that's sort of why I showed that slide with the water. It's like that shape is not something I can like generate from internally. So there's a lot of interesting work that I think can leverage like the accident. And just because it's a process that is so technical and labor intensive doesn't mean you can't strategically insert risk and like accidents into it and like build off of them.
I have a very general question that maybe both of you could answer. I think maybe some of our participants might be interested in why you chose a glass graduate program and how you made the choice to attend the ones that you're at.
Go ahead, Kim.
Okay. So a lot of choosing to go into a glass program had to do with wanting to understand a technical material to the point where I could use it freely within my practice, because I think glass is sexy, and it is very specific in its material properties, though. So I choose to use glass very selectively, but I want the freedom to be able to do that when I choose. I also think that the community was a big draw. I thrive on critical dialogue and critical conversation around my work, and I just don't think that I've seen another community that works in this way, that everyone is connected all the time. And I chose Alfred because it's a sculpture program with a glass-centered glass concentration for grads, because I knew that my work wasn't going to just be glass. I have an overall sculptural practice, but I want to have as much experience in glass as I possibly can.
Why this program? Well, I was at Wheaton Arts, which is 45 minutes away, for 3 years. And that situation ended sort of in a way that I would really needed to get out of there quickly and get into something else. And so I applied to, I think, 5 schools. And just like my personal life and factors outside of my studio practice made Philadelphia make the most sense to me. I was, this close to going to Alfred, so it was a real toss-up. But yeah, I think that the studio here is really large in terms of square footage, and I think I was attracted to the perceived flexibility of the space. You can really do a lot of different things here, and it's sort of under the umbrella of Temple, which is a huge school, and so you can sort of, if you want to, you can sort of swim in the water with a lot of other disciplines, and they gave me a huge fellowship, which you can't ignore that as well.
I would also be curious, Paige, if maybe you could share your story a little bit. I know you recently just graduated, but you were also in a program and people might be interested to hear.
Yeah, when I applied to grad school, I think I applied to 4 programs, 2 which were sculpture-based programs and 2 which were glass programs. And I ended up choosing VCU because, well, the other option for me at the time was a private university, and this one was a public university. And going to a public university just ideologically played a huge role in my decision making. But also when I met the head of the glass program at VCU, Jack Wax, I just felt a very strong connection and could see in him the ways in which he invests in his graduate students. And that just really drew me in. It was almost like a gut instinct immediately that was the program for me. But I chose glass too over sculpture because my foundation's in glass, and having access to those facilities is sort of, it's just priceless, especially when you're in school. Even though my graduate portfolio leaving school, there's really only like 1 glass piece that I made. But to have access to me felt really important, because if I didn't have that and I was thinking conceptually and materially in glass, how was I going to navigate that that lack of access in a sculpture-based program that maybe didn't have a glass facility? Do any of our audience members have any questions?
Oh, I got one. I caught one.
So before you answer, Cooper, since some people might not be able to see the question later on in the recording, the question is about the blow mold that you made with the double walls. What material were you using for the mold again?
The breakaway blow molds. Those were there. So it's two layers. There's sort of a base coat, which was just plaster silica, and I sort of had to negotiate how thin I could get away with without it sort of just collapsing on itself. It's like maybe a quarter of an inch to half an inch thick, and so I would make that face coat and then let it set completely and release it. So like put some sort of Vaseline, what have you, some sort of grease over it, and then do a two-part fiberglass mat, which you can get online. Like they have chopped strand and they make mat. It's almost like a blanket. It's very itchy. Taking that, cutting into strips and dipping it into plaster and silica, squeezing off the excess and like hand building up a two-part thing. Really strong. And I think I actually was using an alpha plaster as well. So it was even harder. And then I would, when that was set, I would drill holes through the flange where they meet and put like it's escaping me now, a bolt, a nut and bolt to like hold them together. Then steam out the mold or heat it up a little bit and pull out the rubber that was in there. And yeah, it was very finicky. And I like, fumbling around with the drill while it's 1,000 degrees and like, it wasn't the best way to do it, but yeah, it was really fun. And every time was like a complete surprise and usually totally unusable, but every once in a while it was pretty good. Stephen is asking me, he's probably in the other room right now, why did you choose to go back to school after working out in the glass world for so long? Well, it's kind of off of what Paige is saying, like access to facilities is rough out in the world. Not to say that you need to work with glass. Like I didn't work with glass for 3 years after leaving undergrad. I just was playing with wax the whole time. I think it's very specific to the time and place where I was. I probably would have not done it if I was in a, like, things weren't so crazy at Wheaton. But I really just wanted to work on my own work. And I had been working on other people's projects for like almost 8 years at that point and solving other people's problems. And, I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to try and work on. And, you think you have an agenda when you get to grad school and then you immediately have to throw it out the window because like none of that stuff is important now and there's a whole new situation. But the motivation is there to like work on your own stuff. I think that should be why you do it. And like, that's why I did it.
Great. Well, we are just about at our time. So to be cautious of what everyone else has going on in their lives, we want to thank Paige for moderating and our guests, whether you were here virtually through Zoom live or with your recording. It was great to both see you and hear about your work. And additionally, thank you all for joining us. If you would like to watch this again, we plan on having it, as I said earlier, on the Facebook group and on YouTube, hopefully within the next couple days of the next week. And last but not least, at the end of all of our GAS student meetups, we announce when the next meeting is going to occur. So October 13th will be our next month's program. And we are going to be joined by GAS board member Lisa Zerkowitz and a past GAS student representative, Boyd Sugiki, and they are the owners of Two Tone Studios. So they're going to talk to us about running their own small business, and the details of that event will be live soon, so just keep an eye out for that registration link. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting. Thank you all for joining. Paige, do you have any other last words you'd like to share?
No, I just want to say thank you again to Kimberly and Cooper for being here with us, and to Ying and Rinoi for sending us their videos in, and for everyone in the audience. And hopefully we'll be doing more PechaKuchas in the future. And also that next month's meetup will be at a different time to accommodate for more international student participation. So that one will actually be held at 3 p.m. Eastern time, or no, sorry, 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So, and that will all be posted in the information leading up. Thanks again.
Bye everyone, thank you.
Guys, take care, everyone.